My name is Lily Perry, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you, to both of you, today about my personal experiences living and growing up in Vienna, Austria, before and also after the Nazis entered Austria in March of 1938. I think it's important for you to be able to hear what life was like during that time from someone who actually experienced that existence. I don't think that hearing what life was like during that dark time from someone who actually was there, that it is possible to actually believe that other human beings could be capable to perpetuate such atrocities that took place at that time. I know that for myself, to this day, I find, and I'm 82 years old, I find it difficult to believe, even though I experienced it firsthand, as did my husband, and that I can actually count, and I can actually count the names of the number of relatives that I had that were exterminated during that, at least 50 or 60, including a beautiful little baby who was my cousin's child, who perished at the hands of the Nazis. Today I'll share with you some of my background and experience and hope that it will be helpful in understanding some of the things you will see or have seen on your own by going to museums. Have any of you been to the Holocaust Museum?
Yeah, I've been to the one in
Washington, Israel?
Yeah.
But then have you ever been to any of the museum? I will share with you my story by telling you about myself, show you pictures and documents what life was like for me and my family, both before and after the Hitler era. Now, we can go to the first slide here. It's going to be hard for me to coordinate the slide and look at.
It's fine.
All right, now, here,
When you
it
want me
says,
to change it, I'll just change it.
maybe I don't need my glasses. I think I'm better off without it. Remember, this is another thing, memory. Here we go, from Deuteronomy chapter 25, the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. They said, remember, never forget, Zachor, which is Hebrew, means remember. And there is hope for the future. And I'd like to ask you, if I may, can I?
Yeah,
without,
of course.
Why do you think that memory and remembering is so important? Either one of you, or both.
Because so the past never repeats itself.
Exactly right. Because by remembering, you hope that the things will never repeat itself. Because otherwise people forget. And even today, even though there are still people like me alive and other people my age are still alive who experienced it, to say, and have the people who were in concentration camps are still alive, some of the elderly who have numbers from the concentration camp, who lost their children, their babies, their aunts, their uncles. And there are still people today, they're called the deniers of the Holocaust, who say it never happened. So the importance of memory and the studying that you're doing and combining it, I think is the most, I think you picked the event of the Holocaust for your European history project. I think there is nothing, there were many, many wars before the Holocaust and after we've had wars, but I think there is nothing that is as unique as this particular event, and that's why it's very, very important to remember this as well as the others, of course. And then there is hope for the future, and that's also a quote from the Old Testament, Jeremiah chapter 31. And why do you think that hope is so important when you study something like the Holocaust?
Well, without hope, there's no hope for the future. Like, you can't accomplish anything.
That's right. And you know, when people were in concentration, well, you know something about
Of course, yeah, of course.
Do. So when people were in the concentration camps, and they didn't know whether they're going to be alive tomorrow or what is going to happen, sometimes the only thing they had that kept them going was thinking that maybe tomorrow will be better, maybe soon it will be better. And that's what kept a lot of people going. So the importance of memory and hope, this is really the thrust of what it is that I want to tell you. If I don't tell you anything else about it, the importance, then this is one of the things, all right? Now, Now, it's good that you're able to listen to people of my generation, since I am, and people of my generation, are probably the last witnesses who are able to recount and confirm, and I mean confirm,
That
so
it
that
actually happened.
that the events of that time and that it did happen. After this generation, it will all be history. And you will read about it in the history books. Your children and grandchildren will read about it in the history books. And things change. Writers change, understanding changes, everything changes. And we know that history often changes the truth as well, the real facts. Even now, as I said before, there are deniers. Now, truthfully, if I didn't experience the Holocaust myself and through my family, it would still be impossible for me to believe that such a thing could ever have happened. Especially, the Holocaust happened through many countries in Europe, including Poland and Russia and Czechoslovakia, then called Czechoslovakia, now called the Czech Republic. But in countries like Germany and Austria, and I don't know if you know much about those countries.
Yeah, we're studying it in
but
Europe. So.
they were always considered, from way, way back, the most civilized, and educated, and cultured people. They have a history of famous composers and writers and doctors and scientists. How could they possibly have done anything like that? Well, in the museum that I worked at before, the one in Battery Park, I don't know if you've been to that one?
No.
In Battery Park. There's big posters to say that Hitler was really a master of propaganda. And there's also such a thing that people say, we have a lot of sayings, but they're meaningful, Mm-hmm. These sayings survive and continue because they really are true.
Yeah.
And it sums it up. And if the story, the propaganda that Hitler was known for was, he based his influence on the fact that if you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it. And that's exactly what he did. Now, Hitler was very good at propaganda, repeating so often that people began to believe that the Jews were responsible for all the bad things that were happening in Germany and Austria at the time. Like, it was right after World War I. Germany lost the war, and they blamed... and so there was a lot of unemployment after the war, and people didn't have jobs, and there was inflation. Today they would buy a loaf of bread for $1 tomorrow, whatever the German money was.
Yeah,
tomorrow it would be. So they had to have somebody to blame, and they needed a scapegoat. And he blamed the Jews for losing World War I. And the thing is, the people who lived in Germany and in Austria were very patriotic to their country. Even though they were Jews, they were very, very patriotic. And they even fought in the army. Now, my father was in the Austrian army, and he was a patriotic Austrian fighting in World War I. An Austrian army. And Hitler blamed the Jews for losing the war. So he told them, we didn't lose the war. The Germans didn't lose the war. Your Jewish buddies betrayed you, and that's why we lost the war. So another way of scapegoating. This is what I want to tell you. His propaganda was so effective that where I lived on a street. My apartment building was on a street with a very wide, was a wide avenue, like Fifth Avenue, let's say. So there were daily parades with the Hitler Youth and the people who belonged to the SS. You know what that is? The Nazi officers were called SS and SA. And the Hitler Youth, and there were parades, but big parades with motorcades and everything, and Hitler would stand on top of them often, with his arms raised, and everybody said, Heil, Heil Hitler, and people believed it, and they sang songs that were so catchy that I, as a Jewish child, they were saying it, I was 10 and a half at the time, they were repeating it so often, and it was such a catchy tune. I was going around my house singing it. My parents were ready to kill me, I'm singing Nazi songs. But that's how effective he was. And he was able to influence but also the other thing that Hitler did, because to try to understand how these cultured, civilized people like the Germans and the Austrians could do this, he had a way of dehumanizing the Jewish people, so that after a while, when you dehumanize something and you make them feel like they're not even human anymore, it's easy to do something bad to that person. So the first thing he did was he changed people's names. He said every Jewish woman, from now, regardless of what her name is, her middle name is going to be Sarah, which is considered a typical Jewish name. And every Jewish male is going to be called, I'm trying to remember, I think Israel, the middle name. And so now there were a lot of Sarahs and a lot of Israels. And then after a while it got worse. When they got to the concentration camps, they became a number. They weren't even a name. They shaved their heads. You know, when you shave everybody's head, everybody almost looks alike. And then, you know, and they were underfed and they were skeletons, and so everybody looked alike. So they were subhuman to them. So it was easier for these civilized, cultured people to do these bad things. It's still not an explanation, but there is no explanation when you ask the question, how could anybody, any human being, do stuff like that? But certainly not the Germans and not the Austrian and not the intellectuals. The intellectuals, it seems, were more responsible than the peasants. Sometimes peasants would hide Jews or whatever and try to help them. It wasn't as good as it sounds that the peasants or some of the Christian peasants had, because usually they got paid very, very well in order to hide a child or to find a piece of bread for you. But still they did. All right. They weren't angels either. Far from it. Anyway. Now, I think we can go to slide number 3.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I was born in Vienna, as I told you, in 1928. It was 82 years ago. And here's a picture of my birth certificate. You know,